So to start things out, to be quite frank, the series is not over, but it's going to be a very rough road ahead if you're Luka Doncic or the Dallas Mavericks team. Obviously, Boston going up 2-0 is pretty standard considering they are the 1 seed facing a 5 seed, and they've been impeccable at home. Now, there have been a couple issues in the playoffs, but overall they've been pretty solid. Today we're going to be talking about just what we saw in Game 2 and what needs to change in order for this series to actually become a legitimate series, because nobody wants to see a sweep in the finals. With that being said, it's your boy Red Hoops. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications if you're into NBA content, and in exchange, I will give you guys the most comprehensive breakdown possible in the shortest amount of time. Let's go ahead and get to it. Obviously, in Game 1, Dallas was struggling mightily hard. They ended up losing by double digits, but this game was a little bit closer, losing by 7, 105-98. This was a very interesting game because it was actually really a strong defensive match. Admittedly, the first game was as well, but a little bit more difficult on the side of Dallas. This game was one of poor shooting on both sides, great defense on both sides, and some interesting heroes for the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, you saw Daniel Gafford get a little bit more involved, particularly in the second half where he saw more success against exploiting the matchups with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and the switching of the defense, because they were willing to do all sorts of switches with the exception of Al Horford being on Kyrie Irving, because against small, quick guards, Al doesn't necessarily hold up. That said, he has been doing exceptionally well in drop covers against Luka Doncic, and he's willing to allow the team to rely on him in those situations because Luka doesn't have that speed. Though he is girthier and has more of a size advantage, he can't necessarily exploit it that same way. Partially because on defense, he's seen a lot more matchups against Jason Tatum, and we saw a lot of situations where he would basically get beat immediately, and the help defense would end up collapsing, forcing Jason Tatum to shoot horribly from the field. But this time, he had a much better rate of making the proper decisions. In Game 1, he only had 5 assists to 6 turnovers. In today's game, he ended up with 12 assists to just 3 turnovers. Now, he still shot poorly from the field. In Game 1, he was 6 of 16 and 3 of 7 from 3. Today, he was 6 of 22 from the field and 1 of 7 from 3. But overall, he did have a much better game as far as being a floor general, which allowed Jrue Holiday not necessarily to have to focus on playmaking. They also saw a lot of situations where Jaylen Brown was seeing a lot more double teams sporadically, and they always came late, usually when he was attacking his man and had the advantage clearly. But it wasn't something to where it was consistently Jaylen Brown every time he gets the ball gets doubled, every time Jason Tatum gets the ball he gets doubled. It was more of a mix and match thing that just happened throughout the game so that they couldn't get really comfortable. Now obviously Jaylen Brown is shooting 8 of 15 from the field and 1 of 5 from 3. There was a little bit of effect there, but it wasn't quite enough. And ultimately, the thing that allowed them to win the game was the fact that Jrue Holiday was just quite sensational today. He was 11 of 14 from the field, which you can't allow to happen if you're the Dallas Mavericks. He doesn't necessarily have the strongest physical advantage on anybody on that team. He's not super quick or anything of the nature. So the fact that you allow him to go 11 of 14, 2 of 4 from 3, hit both of his free throws. The man had 11 rebounds, 4 of them being offensive to go along with 3 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, which were both impactful. But those numbers don't necessarily detail exactly how great he was. He led his team with 26 points, the next closest being Jaylen Brown with 21, and then Jason Tatum with his poor efficiency, literally taking more shot attempts than he had points, 18 points to 22 shot attempts. But Jrue Holiday was fighting over every screen. Remember earlier I said that they didn't want Al Horford to be the one that has to guard Kyrie Irving in any sort of switching situation. That is the one switch they refuse to allow to happen. So by default, the man that has to keep fighting over those screens is Jrue Holiday, and he did an exceptional job. There were a lot of situations where you saw Kyrie Irving get to his spots and he just wasn't able to finish those shots. Part of it is because who he is playing. We've seen him take different shots in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs leading up to the finals, and he was able to, for the most part, hit the shots that he wanted and get to his spots and feel comfortable in those zones. But these first 2 games, he has not had that same level of success. In Game 1, you saw Kyrie Irving going 6 of 19 from the field, 0 of 5 from beyond the arc. Today, you saw him go 7 of 18 from the field and 0 of 3 from beyond the arc. So still not getting that comfortability that he was necessarily hoping for. He did have 6 assists in this one. By comparison, he only had 2 assists last game. But it ultimately doesn't matter if he can't get the ball to drop, because he is supposed to be that second star. And when the supporting cast also isn't stepping up, you can't get the job done. Mind you, Luka Doncic still played phenomenal in this one. He ended up having 32 points, shooting 12 of 21 from the field, 4 of 9 from 3, and a surprising 4 of 8 from the free throw line, which was a little low, but something has to give. He also had 11 rebounds, all being defensive, to go along with 11 assists and 4 steals. Though he did have a high number of steals, there were also a lot of possessions where he just wasn't able to make the same impact that he did in the opening rounds of the playoffs leading up to this point. You saw him get banged up. You saw him being injured early on. And then you saw some other series where he was just really locked in. He could really sit down and go to work. And seeing the man come through the tunnel today and seeing him wrapped up in bandages, people were joking that he looked like he was just coming straight out of a tomb because he was wrapped up like a mummy. And things got really ugly from that point going forward. If you're the Dallas Mavericks, you can't allow Luka Doncic to take too much damage. And the thing was, there wasn't a great way to protect him from it because what the Celtics were doing was making sure he was involved in as many actions on defense as humanly possible. And whenever you do that, the goal is obviously to get him banged up and to tire him out. And they were able to do both of those things with minimal difficulty. Admittedly, he was still extremely well from the field, and he was a very good decision maker nevertheless, as he always tends to be. But he did end up with a total of 8 turnovers, which is honestly insane when you really think about it. When you think of Luka Doncic, you don't think of him being extremely turnover prone. Last game, he did have 10 rebounds to go along with 30 points, but he had 1 assist and also was led with 4 turnovers for the team. Today, 11 assists, yes, but 8 turnovers is pretty dastardly behavior. And though he did have 4 steals in this one, it doesn't necessarily even out the playing field. So overall shooting, he was great. As a decision maker, he was pretty solid, but he was getting ball hawked. He was getting put in a lot of uncomfortable situations, and they were honestly forcing a lot of more actions for other players on his team that weren't comfortable to do anything. The one simple point of action that they wanted to make sure they took care of, and the most important point of emphasis, was making sure guys like Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, Maxi Kleber, and Josh Green don't get threes from the corner. Those are those guys' sweet spots, and those are the easiest three-pointers to make in the game, as it's always been understood. Coming up to this point, they've been shooting hot from the corner, specifically Derrick Jones Jr. and PJ Washington, obviously from both opposite corners. They've been shooting high 40s and very high volume. So they said, you know what? We'll give you guys threes, but it's going to come from above the break where we know you can't shoot. So if somebody's going to beat us, they're going to have to step up and be those next guys. And the difference is when you saw the Timberwolves play against the Dallas Mavericks, they tried that similar thing, but they allowed them to take those shots from the corner. The Celtics aren't allowing that action. If it's above the break, they're on the wing, they're at the top of the key, fine. They'll let them have it all day, every day, because they're not hitting them. Derrick Jones Jr. today was 0 of 3. PJ Washington was 1 of 5. You saw Maxi Kleber go 0 of 2. You saw Josh Green go 0 of 3. So those gentlemen were not hitting from three-point range. And if you look back at game 1, Derrick Jones was 1 of 2. You saw PJ Washington go 0 of 3. You saw Jaden Hardy shoot 3, and he was 1 of 3. You saw Josh Green go 1 of 1. Maxi Kleber got kind of roasted on because he didn't really shoot the ball at all. He only had 1 field goal attempt. And even Tim Hardaway Jr. got to play in game 1 but didn't get to play in game 2. And he attempted his 1-3 and he missed that one as well. So the shooting has not been on their side. Today they were 6 of 26, which works out to 23%. Last game they were 7 of 27, which works out to 26%. So things were just not exactly in their favor from a shooting point of view, but there was a ray of hope. And that comes in the fact that they saw a situation where they were able to hold the Boston Celtics to 10 of 39 shooting from 3. That's something that you love. Derek White was 4 of 10. He was 6 of 15 overall shooting. Defensively, him and Drew Holiday were really standing on business though, and that was slightly problematic. But you saw Jason Tatum go 1 of 7 from 3. You saw Jaylen Brown go 1 of 5 from 3. You saw Al Horford go 1 of 3 from 3. The only person that shot 50% or above on more than 2 attempts was Drew Holiday, who was 2 of 4. Off the bench, you had Porzingis go 0 of 3. You saw Sam Hauser go 0 of 5. And you saw Peyton Pritchard go 1 of 2. So you love how your three-point defense was going, and honestly, holding them to 105 points is really good business considering how many options they have and the fact that their team as a whole has had the best decision makers in the game across the floor. The lack of proper defensive capabilities, though, has been kind of exploited because you see a lot of situations where a lot of guys like Jaylen Brown have been expected to be more so the decision makers, because you know the head of that offense for the most part has been Drew Holiday. He is the point guard. He's more of a traditional guard, defensively oriented though. At the same time, they forced Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to be more decision makers. They said, if you're going to put the ball in your hands, we're going to make you either shoot that 3 and you're not going to hit it. Combined, they were 2 of 12 today, so it proves it was right. or we're going to make you get that ball out of there and see if you can make the right pass and make the right read. And today, more often than not, they did. Though the shots didn't always go down, as we saw by the 25% shooting from three-point range, they were making the right passes. Combined, they had 19 assists to 9 turnovers, which isn't a great ratio considering the fact that Jaylen Brown had 7 assists to 6 turnovers. But Jason Tatum was much improved overall, being 12 assists to 3 turnovers as said previously. So I do love where the Celtics still managed to get things done, even with Jason Tatum allegedly their best player, unless you feel like Jaylen Brown is, playing so horribly from his shooting standpoint and taking almost a quarter of the team's shot attempts. They had 84 shots and he took 22 of them. So, that's a very unhealthy diet considering they still managed to shoot 45% from the field. To end this off, I just want to say, nevertheless, the objective, if you are the Dallas Mavericks, to get back into this one, you have to put Derek Lively in winnable positions. Right now, he is looking very human. He's looking like the 19 or 20-year-old, I think he's 20 now, the 20-year-old that he is. They've been able to put him in situations, particularly on defense, where he's on the weak side and he has to decide which man, whether it be the corner or the wing, he wants to commit to early and how he wants to play things on the defensive side of the ball. On offense, he has seen a couple of possessions where he has to be necessarily the short roll guy and he's been expected to make decisions. Daniel Gafford's done a little bit better of a job so far this series with those opportunities. But you want to see a world where Lively gets a little bit more proper action because he only played 19 minutes today. He ended up having a world where he had 7 rebounds total, 3 of them being offensive. So he is still finding some sort of footing, but it's just not the same as it was before. Before, you saw a world where he was arguably the 3rd or 4th best player on this roster, depending on how you felt about PJ Washington. But now you're seeing him fall back into that young child role where he's trying to develop himself, understand where he needs to be on the floor, and he's being exploited as a result because the other 5 guys that are on the court are prepared. They're all on the same page, and they're not going to allow him to get away with anything. And if they see somebody has a mental lapse in judgment, they're going to take advantage. And that person, unfortunately, has been the rookie, Derek Lively, who, despite it all, has still had a really phenomenal playoff run up to this point. But if you're the Dallas Mavericks, Kyrie Irving has to hit shots. PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., Maxi Kleber, Josh Green, all those guys have to be able to hit their threes, whether it be from the corner if they are allowed and provided to be open, or if they're from above the break, they have to find a way to get those shots down, or at the very least, don't put those shots into their shot diet to begin with. If you know you're not going to hit a 3 and you know you're going to combine for 1 of 8 if you're a starter, or 1 of 13 overall, as they ended up shooting combined between the 4 of them today, if you know you're not going to be able to shoot properly, go ahead and get the ball out of your hands. Go ahead and make a shot attempt closer to the rim. Even though they're not terrific at creating for their own offensive settings, you need a world where Kyrie Irving isn't being forced to play iso ball every time, and then he's playing a 1-man, 2-man, your turn, my turn game with Luka Doncic. Yes, Luka was being a better playmaker today, but overall, guys weren't hitting their shots. Kyrie has to find a way to outplay Jrue Holiday. They have to get some more screen actions that get Jrue off of him so that Al Horford can be the man in that situation, or just honestly, Sam Hauser, even though he's been a lot better than a lot of people expected him to be, just finding a way to create better mismatches to allow Kyrie to exploit things. I don't trust that Kyrie's going to end up going back to Dallas and still shooting this putrid from the field. I think he's going to see a world where he does shoot high 40s. I'm hoping closer to 48 to 50% from the field and hits a healthy dose of his 3-point attempts. But it's going to be a rough road forward because Luka Doncic does have a lot of wear and tear to his body. And while he is trying his hardest, there's only but so much he can do offensively before he collapses himself and he has to rely on some sort of safety net from the rest of his team to help him push forward. This is still a winnable series if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan, but they cannot afford to go down 0-3. This 3rd game will be pivotal going back to Dallas and having their first home finals game since the 2011 finals, and I believe they have what it takes to get the job done. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Of course, I'm always interested to hear your takes. What did you see in the game that I didn't discuss right here? Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member of the channel to help support the content. As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.